Patrick Smith is the creative director of C2 Creative Studio. His areas of expertise are everything from brand design to video production to graphic design, visual design. And we were talking about needing to bring a designer on to discuss a little bit about their approach. I mean, I think it's one thing for us to be able to do graphics, but it's another thing to understand when to use those graphics, when to not use those graphics, how do we come up with something that is visually appealing and achieves the end result that we're looking for. So I'm very excited to introduce Patrick Smith here to the show. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about how did you become a designer? Where did it all begin for you?
Well, it all began way back in college, and I could remember the moment like it was yesterday. I was struggling with what I wanted to do with myself in life. At school, my parents are paying for my tuition and asking me, what am I going to do with myself? And almost like a bolt of lightning, one day I was walking down the hall in in the art building, and I saw these posters on the wall, and I didn't know what class it was for. It wasn't art history. It wasn't some other random art or theater class. It was graphic design, and I said, that's what I want to do. And it's been kind of it's taken over my life since then. But after school, I got into more the advertising side of the design world, meaning more in advertising and marketing versus like straight practice of graphic design. And that's evolved a little bit over time as I've just kind of worked through different agencies and had different opportunities. And as time goes on too, back when I started school, the internet was just barely a thing. And now it's embedded in every project we do basically, unless it's a pure print piece. So going back 25, 30 years, I've just been bitten by that bug from that, seeing those posters in the hallway, and have been doing it ever since.
That's great. It sounds like when you go into a design process now, you're really thinking about all the mediums, whether it's video, print, web. How do you approach that, or how do you think about that as you begin a project?
Yeah, so we kind of focus on three areas, if you will. Creative strategy, and that's obviously the starting point for everything. So depending on what the project is, if it's a company that's going to launch and they don't even have a name yet, that's the starting point, is the deep strategy work. The other kind of bucket that we work in is the brand design part, and that really is what's the look and feel, what's the voice of the brand. So we look through that lens when we're working on those kinds of projects. But I think the thing we work on the most, I think, is the creative campaign part of it, and that's to your point. There's all kinds of different dots you need to connect when you're launching a brand and a marketing campaign, and what the customer is actually seeing and feeling. So the average customer takes somewhere between 7 and 11 touch points before they'll make a buying decision. So that's a lot of materials that you need to produce and have in the back of your mind, whether it's email campaigns, video content, direct mail postcard, or some kind of event. It changes kind of the approach you might have on putting together a campaign.
What do you think creative directors miss the most often?
Besides deadlines?
Yes.
Yeah. What I think what might happen over time, and it's because a little bit of exhaustion, or people get, and I'm not meaning working late nights. I mean, a project just might go on for too long, is the original strategy. And sometimes it may shift along the project as things evolve and new information comes along. But sometimes the original strategy that everybody agreed to in the beginning might not stay as true as it needs to 3 months later or 2 months later when a project's getting into production. So that's one area.
Have you seen the infamous swing set cartoon? There's this one where they have the swing set. It's like what the sales guy sold the client, what the client asked for, what the creative director, what the creative did with it, what the client really needed.
Sure.
Yeah,
I've not seen it, but I can envision it. It sounds like a familiar visual.
Yeah. I mean, because it's really hard to keep the thread sometimes. There's so many meetings, there's so many committees, there's so many other things that come into it that you forget why you started that, right?
Absolutely. Things get watered down over time, and sometimes it's just people want to move a project forward, and some say good's better than not having anything at all. So it's just trying to keep that strategy as fine tuned and as sharp as humanly possible. So when something does go out in the marketplace, it's got that impact and power that everybody's hoping for.
Now, when you think about design, how do you start to think about layout and process of how do you get people's attention? How do you keep their attention with that design?
Sure. A lot of people, because I'm a designer first, think that I think visually all the time, and there is some truth to that. But for me personally, when I'm coming up with concepts and a start of a design, I think with words, and I need something like just a keyword, something like brutal or distressed or exuberant or a more positive word, and that usually is my way in or a hook. That get me going down a track. And so whether it's a tagline kind of thing, like a just do it, that's kind of an easy one to throw out. But you can you get an attitude or a feel towards things. So when it comes to the design, I want to make sure that attitude and feeling from any given word or set of words is starting to kind of come together visually and creates that feeling. So that's usually the starting point for me, is just what's the key insight or key few words that can start to crystallize a vision for whatever it is we're putting together.
When you think about design, kind of like with the creative thing, when you're thinking about design, what do you think people miss the most when they're doing design? When they're designing a page that you're going to look at, what do you think that they miss the most when they're putting it together from a design perspective?
Sure. I think, a tendency is not to miss something, but to put too much in. Right. So I love all of our clients. They're all fantastic. However, sometimes I like to say a lot, and an 8.5 by 11 page or an ad or whatever it is. Sometimes you could say too much, and then in turn you end up saying nothing at all. So it's kind of that classic, just stuffing too much stuff into in any given bag. So it's really about removing and minimizing and eliminating and getting down to the core message. It's kind of built around the idea that the powerful piece of communication has a single focus. And if you can get to that single focus and keep that as pure as you can, then I think your design or your ad or whatever the communication is has got a piece of a chance to succeed.
Does some of that get easier now that you have lots of modes to talk to someone? So I can give you a print ad that's going to hopefully grab onto you, or a billboard that's going to grab onto you, but it's going to send you to a QR code or a URL or something where then I can deliver more information rather than trying to put it all into the billboard or the printed page.
Absolutely, I think that's been a really nice addition over the years, is seeing the QR codes or our websites obviously becoming a drive to web kind of thing. And the other piece to that is you can actually start to measure and get some analytics around your media and what's working and what's not. So that's become a real powerful tool for marketers over the last 10 years or so.
Do you have any, those of us who build a lot of QR codes have lots of opinions about QR codes. Do you have any? Are there certain kinds of QR codes that you like, or do you try to keep them as basic as they can be? There's the purists who don't want to change any of the shape and form, and then there's the rest of us.
Yeah,
I play with them a lot.
It's a double-edged sword. You need to know your audience. So if you do something too clever or too tricky, and if it's for the masses, you may miss some people. So the upside of having kind of the classic ugly QR code, kind of the mishmash of pixels there, it's just so obvious. Everybody knows, or most people know what that is off the bat, and they know they should click it. So I go both sides of the fence on this, because it just kind of depends again on the audience. But I guess I kind of default leaving them a little more just as they come out versus trying to customize them. I know you can put logos in the middle of them and do other kinds of things, and I think that's great. It just kind of depends on the client as well as who we're talking to.
We've got a lot of questions starting to roll in, so we're going to jump to those. If you have questions, go ahead and throw them into Makana, or you can go to askofficehours.global. I will open up the drop and take a look at it. So askofficehours.global, or go ahead and throw them into Makana. Bill, let's go to the first question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas has our first one here, and Paul says, how do you do a discovery call with a client, and what do you use? Do you use Zoom or another platform?
I will typically use Zoom. Phone calls, I think, are also very helpful. I think on the first couple of calls. I think it just staring at everybody's screens, I think we can kind of get hypnotized a little bit. So I prefer a phone call if we can. I think the conversation just becomes a little bit more natural, although I'm not opposed to Zoom at all. It just kind of depends on where we're at with the client.
What kind of questions do you ask when you're trying to figure it out?
It really is. It's really trying to figure out, starting where their business is at. Where are you? Have you been around for 20 years, or have you been around for 6 months, and you're trying to get a product out the door? It's really kind of where they're at in their business. And then it's this, again, very simply, what are your objectives, and really just getting to the heart of that, and then trying to have a very clear idea of what they're trying to achieve. Lots of times when it's a new business, or a little bit all over the place trying to launch, and they've got 10,000 ideas, and and they want to tell you each one of them. A little bit more mature businesses usually trying to go after a very specific target, or achieve a very more crystal clear thing in the market. Meaning, we're trying to gain 1% in this category, or we're trying to do a line extension, and we need to be strategic about how we roll this out because of X, Y, and Z. So it's really trying to figure out their objectives, and then there's all the other kind of like their marketing history, if you will. What have they done in the past? What's worked? What strategies are they implementing now? And for instance, on this is we've been working with a vitamin company for a little bit, and as we've been going through discovery, we've kind of learned that they don't really have a strategy, and they have dozens and dozens of products, but no real strategy or lead horse or way to bundle these things or anything like that to sell them to customers to make them a little bit more attractive. So we're working with them just even on the most basic of basic things that you think at a discovery call, these things would be kind of buttoned up, and everybody would have their orders all aligned and squared up somewhere in some kind of document. But quite honestly, a lot more often than not, people are trying to figure out the strategy on the fly. So it can range for a bunch of different things, but those are probably the three main basics.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois says, you mentioned working with brands that don't even have a name yet. How would your design affect the name of a business?
Well, the design, it's always going to be about what the customer is trying to achieve. So I think we have a little bit of a house style. It's probably a little bit more on the bold side, maybe a little bit more on the aggressive side, maybe a little bit more on just trying to be more of a bold kind of approach towards any brand. Now, if it's a makeup company and it's something very technical and specific, those attributes that I just mentioned may not be appropriate for this logo, or this name, or the design may not be appropriate for, our house brand might not be appropriate for what they're trying to achieve. So we'd really try to dial in the design, the execution of it based on what the client's trying to achieve, not so much kind of our approach per se.
Do you have any opinions about developing names? Is it very literal, or is it very esoteric? Where do you kind of lean in that area?
If I could rule the world, I would tend to steer clients towards more abstract names and symbolic names, because you never know where the market's going to go in 5 years. And
just ask Salesforce how that worked out for them.
Yeah.
Salesforce, and it does so many things now, but it's still stuck in the same name.
Well, if you're big enough, you can kind of get away with some of those things because you've got the power of PR just churning all the time. But we worked with a medical billing company, which I won't give the name, but they were very specific about what kind of disease state they billed in, and they wanted to branch out into other categories of health and disease states, and they had a really hard time because they just couldn't get the traction because they were already labeled and named for a very specific type of disease. So I think when you do that, you kind of put yourself in a box for a little while. Or you can.
Do you find that another thing that we find is that partners will name their company after their product, and then they don't have anywhere to go? Like if they want to add a new product, they're now, like it's Facebook and Google both figured that out long after they created it. Like, hey, maybe we ought to go up one, and have the product sit below that process.
Yeah, alphabet and the meta, what you're referring to. Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes you can't see that far in the future, but when you have a few $billion in the bank, it tends to you can kind of do those things retroactively a little bit. But yeah, it's always better, I think, in my mind, unless you have a one-off product that is designed to fix one specific thing, almost like this vitamin company I mentioned. That's one thing, but I like to have a little bit of air and places to pivot and maneuver to if I'm naming a brand. So I like having more abstract kind of names than versus the literal.
Yeah. Next question.
Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia is up next. I struggled to design materials for a house of worship that convey abstract concepts like faith and hope. Do you have any pointers or book recommendations?
I don't have any book recommendations off the top of my head, but I would feel like that subject matter is also you're working with a lot of imagery that also has they're kind of loaded, if you will, right? So how do you take something a subject matter that already is kind of ethereal and full of symbols and try to help make it a little bit more literal? I think you just need to try to use symbols and ideas, illustrations that people are familiar with, and don't introduce anything that's going to be confusing. It really just needs to be a less is more kind of approach to things, at least in my opinion, not being able to see it, but a less is more is usually the way to go with these kinds of things.
Do you use, I guess a more open question, do you use AI for any of your thought processes?
A double-edged sword. What I've learned, I thought in the beginning when Midjourney came out, maybe a year ago or year and a half ago, whatever it was, and everybody was jumping on it. I thought it was going to be a tool that we could use in our jobs, like in our designs per se, even on a production level. So that's what I was hoping to a point. And it turns out, like as of right now, it's probably not that kind of tool. What it is, where I've had success with it, is in two areas. One, visually, if I just need to come up with some, get my brain going and experiment and play around with just combination of things that I could never find or create in the real world. One of the toy images I kind of came up with when I was starting this was having the old wrestler Randy Macho Man Savage eating tacos at a Taco Bell. It was just something to play around with. But you could have fun with it like that kind of way, but in a more serious way, if you need to get smart on a subject matter. So that's where I've been able to use it the most is trying to get smart on a topic, whether a client comes to us and says, hey, we need to start figuring out how to do X, Y, and Z. It's just kind of a nice, easy way to get up to speed on something that you may not know a lot about.
Yeah, I agree with you. I use Midjourney a lot, but I don't use it to build anything. Like I do focus on prompts a little bit, but for me, the big thing is that I'll throw something simple in and I turn the stylization and variety all the way up. And this is in the web page. I just turn it all the way up and I hit very, very strongly, very strongly, very strongly. And you just go into this world of like, it just goes, it kind of just goes crazy. I don't turn the weirdness really makes it go crazy and makes it impossible to use. But as I turn that all the way off, but I turn those other ones on, I leave it on standard instead of raw. And it just kind of just wanders all over the place. And it has, you end up with lots of variation, like in lots of ideas. And I love brainstorming that way. I'm not going to use any of that, but it's something that I find really effective. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someday maybe we'll get something more specific.
Really quick, one practical area where we've used it is we've had a couple of inset shots, not hero shots, but kind of more smaller images that we needed to fill holes on websites. And we didn't have time or budget for a photo shoot, and we were able to create imagery for this website and be able to launch it because we had some AI images. Yeah.
There's so many places where we've gone to Photoshop when I'm doing a shoot, and it might be video shoot or a still shoot, but usually video shoots, and we need pictures in the walls, of different things. And I imagine over the weekend I was playing with, and it produced some stunning images. And I realized I'm never going to go to a thrift shop trying to find photos again, or to a stock agency, because now I can just print them out. I can just come up with exactly what I want on that wall, and just print them out and frame them, and stick them into all the different things. And you can, I think stock photography are things that we don't It doesn't have to be specific; just has to have a flavor. It seems to do well.
It's come in really handy for us with stock photography as well. When sometimes a client will get hung up on, is that the real person we're going to use, or is that the real, just whatever it is.
Right.
And what for a website we just did recently for a client that's a union, we were able to stylize some of the stock imagery so that everything kind of felt like it was on brand when they saw the presentation. Right. And like their colors were in there, the right demographics and all that kind of stuff. And it saved us a ton of time having to try to find images. So that was another big time saver.
Absolutely. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. Up next, how do you design to a budget? Do you try to change the client's idea or wallet?
Hopefully both. You definitely have to change. It's all about extremes and how far we're taking these, but we'll definitely work on a budget. You just need to really set expectations with the client about what they're getting and how many rounds of revisions and all that kind of stuff, and really just try to put them in a tight set of specifications so that you're not going and drifting off, or they're able to go off and drift and make lots and lots of changes. So with that, I try to start off with a creative brief or a project brief that's very detailed, so that we both know what path we're going down and what they can expect as a final deliverable. So,
how do you handle revisions?
Every client's a little different, but broadly speaking, we try to build in 2 rounds of revisions for every project. It's pretty standard. Nobody ever sticks to it. and I just went through something the other day where we went through 17 rounds for a web page once, and it's just the nature of the beast. So how do you deal with it? If it's a client you really like and they spend lots of money with you and all that kind of stuff, you're a little bit more forgiving because the dollars and cents are there. If it's always that one client that you're trying to help out from the beginning. They're usually like a real estate agent, and nothing wrong with real estate agents, but they need a business card tomorrow, and you're trying to help them. And then 14 versions later, you finally get them something that they're happy with. So, and you made $25.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. I'm always trying to figure out how to define non-recursive edits, which means that if you don't tell me about it, like in the first round, we can keep on fixing the things we did from the first round, but we can't change things that, like, everything else is billable. Like I'm just like, it's per hour if you ask for something that you didn't ask for on the first round of revisions, because that's the part that gets. But like you said, it's all flexible. You end up, you define those things and then you do what you're going to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Each email, we just try to just nudge them a little bit. We try not to be super hardcore about it, but hey, this is the second round. After this, we're going to have to start, tracking and all that kind of stuff. So there's gentle nudges along the way. So
absolutely. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama City's up next. How do you put together live streaming and design? Do you work on campaigns implementing live streaming?
Do you do any live streaming at all, or work on campaigns that include those?
No. The short answer would be no. So we've done stuff like that with speakers, where we've been at an event that's been part of something, but it's not really our sweet spot per se.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. This is interesting. How often are you approached to put a pun in the brand?
Do you ever have fun? Does anyone ever want a pun added to their? Someone thinks it's funny.
Just the bun companies that we work for. No, on the buns, but
bakeries.
Clients not so much, writers more so, and every once in a while one will get through, but it just depends.
Do you have to just look at them and say that's not very punny?
Yeah.
So anyway,
but I will say, if the intent is to get a laugh, sometimes putting those in a presentation can be really powerful. Right. So if you're doing something for a client that might be highly regulated in healthcare, that's not a barrel of laughs every day. Stuff like that can make an impact in a presentation and loosen everybody up and get their, just kind of reset their brain. So I'm not opposed to puns, strategically.
Since you do some health brand stuff, is there a strategy to when you give people, like, how you handle the disclaimers that happen in those ads? Do you think about, like, where do you put them and how do you put them? It seems like we're going to tell you everything about it, then we're going to tell you what all the things it can do badly, and then but we're going to leave you with a nice note.
Exactly. The important safety information.
Yeah.
I think over the last, 15, 20 years or so, there's definitely become like a standard place for it. It's usually shoved somewhere towards the bottom, but it has to be, if I remember correctly, the font sizes have to be the same size plus one of the body copy or something like that. There's a formula for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be as visible as the body copy, same type and leading spaces. So you can't like kern everything to, be a small block or whatnot. So,
right.
You try to, there's kind of a formula for it now where it kind of gets locked up by the logo and all the other code lines and things like that.
Yeah. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. How do you make the product's purpose clear to the user?
Well, several different ways to do that. I mean, I'll just quickly, it always also depends on how well the audience is aware of the product. If they're not aware, you probably need to be very literal with it, in either describing it in words or showing it in use, like a demo kind of ad. If it's something that's a little bit more, people are familiar with it, and it's a crowded market and you need to do something to really differentiate yourself, then it might be a little bit more of a creative exercise and doing something, whether it's punny work or just, just kind of more experimental kind of design or creative approach to something. It just kind of depends on where it's at. But I prefer doing something a little bit more differentiating, and I like if you can show the product demonstrating what it does, the benefit for the customer. That's always an upside.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama City. Which tools would you recommend for generating permanent QR codes? In addition, codes that are designed flexible.
I feel a little unprepared for the question, but there is a service that we use, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's something like QR Code Depot or something like that. So I wish I had a better answer, but I don't have a resource off the top of my head.
That's all good. Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, Washington in the USA here. And Guy wonders, what's a project that you just nailed it for?
There's a client that we worked with fairly recently called SEIU, SEIU 1000. They're a 16,000 person union out in California, and we've been working with them on and off for the last 2 or 3 years. A lot of design projects. They have all kinds of different needs, from just postcards that get handed out at local events.
I've done actually some work with them as well, and they're fairly forward thinking. So they're we did some live streaming with them during COVID.
And I could go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll say I could share something on my screen if it would make things easier.
Absolutely.
Let me get to this. Yeah, and I don't know if I have the whole website in here, but we just launched a website for them not too long ago. But I'll roll through this relatively quick. There's probably a half a dozen or a dozen slides here. But we've done everything for them, from trade events and the branding around those events, where they bring in 1,000 people to a meeting and they talk about the strategy and planning for the next year kind of thing. So what you're looking at now are just some core graphics for an event. We've done all kinds of very simple graphic design type of solutions for their materials, where before they were kind of all over the place. They do have an in-house group, and I don't like speaking too critical about other designers, other groups, but it just seemed like they just didn't have a consistent voice or a consistent presentation when they were going out to the market. So that's one thing that I think we helped them, was as they were building their brand. And the name of the game for them in their world is membership. And when you have membership, you have more power and more leverage over the state and contracts. So that's kind of what they're trying to promote in all their materials is let's join forces and we can all have a better quality of life kind of thing. But and these are a couple of brochures, covers or contract covers that we developed for them. Let me just jump to something a little more. This was a successful piece to answer the question. So this identity was the kind of the hallmark or the hub, if you will, for a campaign.
And for this, is this something that you pitched them on the whole campaign, like what it's going to say, how it's going to look? Did they already have the words that they wanted to use, or is this something you worked with them on?
Yeah, I work with their creative director, or they have not a creative, communications director, basically a PR person that works with the newspapers and other local media to get the word out. And so we collaborated on this, and we did probably 4 or 5 different concepts. And this was the one that was chosen. So, and each one had a slightly different language too.
Right.
So it was a collaborative effort. But you could see these materials just end up being put in all kinds of step and repeats, posters, all kinds of things that happen on the ground, a lot of grassroots level. Also, we need to be cognitive of things that, if these stories do get picked up by the media, and this one was, how does it look and through the lens of television cameras and things along those lines. So there's a lot of planning that goes on into some of these things, even though they seem very simple. We need to be smart about how we look and appear on TV. And, everything from floor stickers or street graphics for people to identify a march or a walk. It's less of a protest and more just kind of a walk, if you will, and bring awareness to these. All the way to, I'm just going to jump ahead to this kind of a brand new website. I don't have a before and after, but what you're seeing on the left is kind of the load view within the website. And their previous website was just something that they were struggling with for a few years because it wasn't a good hub for information or quite honestly very usable by most people. So we did an overhaul to make this more of a hub for news and other.
And do you mostly build these in things like WordPress?
This was ultimately built in WordPress. Yes. Yeah.
That looks nice.
Thank you. One more version. This is just another concept that this one did not get produced. The one previous was the one that got executed. So
that's great.
Yeah. So
that's awesome. It's really good.
Thank you.
Next question. Next one comes to us from Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. How has remote work helped or hurt graphic design?
Where I think it's hurt is as anybody can become a graphic designer overnight, and there's platforms where there's like Fiverr and Upwork. Although those are double-edged swords, I'm going to stay on the negative for a second. It's one thing that can condition the market to expect lower prices or drops the floor, if you will, in terms of a billable, the perception around what should be a billable hour kind of thing, or the rate around a billable hour. But on the upside, if you're a graphic designer and you're in the middle of a state that doesn't have a lot of big cities or a lot of big commerce, well, suddenly you can be in the game because now you've got a website, and if you've got talent and some connections, you can start to build a career, and you don't have to be in New York, and you don't have to be in Chicago or San Francisco or something like that. You could be in the middle of anywhere. So there's pros and cons to it. There's pros. There's like any technology, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana wonders, how do you make a design both detailed and long-lasting? And are these goals complementary or are they in conflict?
They can definitely be complementary. I think the long-lasting, the timelessness of something will speak to how true the creative brief or product brief was, or what you're trying to make. If it's an identity, that might be the easiest thing because those tend to last a little bit longer, and you can get 20 years out of it. And these days, it's kind of a miracle. Right. How detailed does it have to be? It's always kind of it's very subjective. It's hard to say, but simple, I think, does win. I think that doesn't mean you can't have beautiful, ornate things that last a long time. But I think in today's world right now, the simpler the better, because we're just bombarded with all kinds of things.
Do you have any rules of thumb when you think about something like a logo design? So someone comes and says they want to design a new logo. Are there certain rules or things that you think about that are definite things you're aiming for, or definitely things you don't want to do?
Yeah, that's what you mentioned this. I have a client who's very, very smart, and almost too smart. And every once in a while, she'll come with an idea. And the last time she came with an idea for a logo, and there were like too many ideas baked into one thought. And I told her, when it comes to logo design, you get like one trick. You can't add like 3 or 4 different like graphic little treatments. Nobody looks at a logo that way. So I executed what she was asking for almost very literally, and it became it just wasn't legible at the end of the day compared to some of the other paths we wanted to take her down. So, yes, simplicity and basically, like I think I said this before, a powerful piece of communication really relies on a single focused idea. If you have too many of them, it starts to water it down.
Yeah, I oftentimes think about it, if it's more complex than I think I can knit or that I can stitch onto a baseball hat, I'm probably going too complicated.
Yeah, that's a great rule of thumb. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in squares too. I mean, a square window in that long logos. As someone who used to have to do something with a long, I was working at a place where we had a long logo, and the amount of trouble that created for me as a designer, you were just like, I just never want to see one that doesn't fit nicely into a square. And again,
yeah.
So
yep, absolutely.
Next question.
Next one comes from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. How do you feel about capitalization in text? Not just all caps, but the use of lowercase too much.
The use of lowercase too much.
Sometimes people will build their logos or a lot of the stuff with lowercase. That's like all lowercase. Sure. They don't use any. So it's all uppercase or all lowercase or a variety of different things there.
Gotcha. It so depends. I mean, we try to start with the personality. I mean, obviously the positioning and everything else, but when it comes to the typography, becoming part of an identity, it's all about the personality. So there's no right or wrong. I think my tendency is to it just depends on the business. We've done 1,000 both ways, uppercase, lowercase. It just depends on the personality.
Next question.
Next one comes from Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Putting you on the spot, what are 3 company names you'd pitch for a new audio production business? And the keywords are dynamic and quality.
That might be too specific. I don't know. I don't know if we'd be able to for audio production. Yeah. Let's go to the next question. I'm not sure how to process
absolutely, because I don't think having been at those tables that anybody wants no time to think about it at all. Yeah. Brody Hefner in New York City. What insights can you offer regarding the design of effective video thumbnails for YouTube or similar sites?
Yeah, this is becoming a bigger and bigger topic. I've seen, oddly, a little bit of messaging around this lately. In my opinion, going back to typography, I think it's about just having something that's super legible and hyper telegraphic. That's something that somebody can read on their phone. So to me, it's usually about the name of the show, and if you can come up with an identity or the name or whatever it is, that's just iconic and super simple, so everybody knows what that is at a glance. That's great. Other shows are driven by the guests, and sometimes the guest needs to be kind of more the feature. But obviously, everybody's doing this to kind of build up their own show. So if you can create a thumbnail that really kind of features the name of the show instantly, that's the way to go.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City. Louis Dorfsman was responsible for every aspect of advertising and identity at CBS for 40 years of his career. Are these kinds of careers still viable with the short attention span of society?
40 years at a television station probably is gone. I don't know if anybody's gonna be able to do that.
I don't know if television stations will be here in 40 years.
Yeah, I'll just say I don't know, but there are, I don't know, what do you call them? A lifetime, kind of job still, I think, out there, but it's probably not in news or television.
Do you delve into typography at all?
Oh yeah.
Because it seems like a lot of the clients that I work with have kind of gone to this developing their own font. Like, this is the font that we want to use, and the advantages are they look a little different, and the other advantage is they're not paying for every font. Like they pay for it once, and then they just distribute it to, like, this is the font we're using. Is that something you've seen grow over the last decade?
Yeah, for sure. I think as the tools have become easier to create typefaces, and with the web, because there's just so many standards. I mean, it's not as bad as it was 10 years ago, but 10 years ago there was all kinds of font issues. It's always been kind of the Achilles heel of any designer, just on the technical side. So yes, there has been a explosion, might be the wrong word, but an increase definitely in custom typefaces. The city of Chicago just came up with its own city typeface called Big Shoulders. It was designed in town here by a local designer.
Are there any foundries that you enjoy the most? Do you work with specific foundries?
So I have a fondness for T26, if you're familiar with them at all, Carl.
Yeah, they're great.
I think XO is another one here in Chicago, and then I'm blanking on another one. But yeah, and then there's always a Maigret, and there's all kinds of other ones that were doing really hip things in the late 90s, early 2000s. But then there's the usual cast of characters. There's myfonts.com just got bought. I wish I could remember the name, but there's starting to become some consolidation in the industry right now with some of the big guys going after some of the medium tier font houses.
Next question.
Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. Up next, I've always had trouble deciding on levels of transparency. Any helpful clues about avoiding too much or too little?
Always depends on the image, but I like it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Short answer for me, I guess, would be if I'm stuck and I'm trying to figure something out, I work in this quarter mode. And what I mean by that is if it doesn't look good at 100%, then I dial it down to 75. If it doesn't look good at 75, I dial it down to 50, and then so on to 25. And then instead of tinkering with it between 76 and 73%, or whatever the numbers are, I just try to use the rule of thumb just to get into one of those quadrants, and then use the squint test to kind of make sure that I can still see the image.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington, back again, this time with, on the web page, we see photography, video scripting, and video production. Can you walk us through one of your past projects?
Video scripting and production, all the way through production. Sure. We just recently, in the last year or two, I should say, we've been working with a educational group that helps severely disabled children use technology to better communicate. So going through the scripting process all the way through final production, and I should say really quickly too, this is like a kind of like, it's not a state-funded program per se, but it's a state initiative, the state of Illinois, to help teach the teachers how to become better classroom facilitators, and there's some technical things in there as well. But basically, we work with the client to help. They're the subject matter experts in this particular client, and they develop the initial script, and we work with them to help edit it and clean things up and come up with ideas around how to make these teaching modules are usually about an hour long, and they're broken up into 4 or 5 different sections. So how do we tell a big story when you're talking about something maybe not so fun like confirmation bias? So how do we make these things that people are really comfortable with talking about moderately entertaining? And then from there, it is a storyboarding process where we go through each module and just kind of map things out what's going to end up happening. To a large extent, these are kind of talking heads on green screen, so we don't have to worry too much about locations and sets and things like that. We can kind of mock up whatever story we need to happen in the background, and then from a production perspective, it really is just getting everybody on the same page of what we're trying to accomplish. Get the look and feel down in the studio before we start shooting, and casting the right talent, which is always a kind of a challenge too, because we have to usually do multiple languages. And then when it's shoot day, we have our approved scripts. We've got our plan for what we're going to be doing in post. And it's just a matter of the talent coming through and the client nodding at every line as they're read off the teleprompter in production. So I know it's a long answer. Sorry about that. But there's a lot of moving parts when you're doing video production.
Absolutely. Next question.
Ryan Thomason in Houston, Texas. How do you feel about having both animated and static logos for a company?
I love it. I think the animation logos they can be overdone and be kind of get a little bit out of control. But in general, I think if you have a smart identity and you have a clever way to animate it and bring some life to it, I think there's nothing but positive equity that can come from that.
Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. Discuss brand auditing, positioning, narratives, and visualizations. And can you define and break them down?
I don't know if I need to define each one of them, but maybe talk about brand auditing and how you approach that.
Yeah, it's really not every client gets excited about this because it's a little bit of work for them, but it's basically taking all their marketing materials that they've done in the last year or two, or at least all the customer touch points, and trying to map that out from a visual and verbal messaging kind of perspective. But it's not just the physical materials itself. It's who they're interacting with from a sales perspective or a customer service perspective too, and trying to figure out what's being communicated at what point, and where things maybe where the marketing's working but the sales are dropping off. So we try to figure that part of the process out as well. And this could be everything from or a combination of people sending us the client sending us actual hard copies of things, but it's also cross-sectioning that with Google Analytics and any Salesforce data that they might have. So it's kind of triangulating that and seeing where the customer journey. It's really about figuring out what the customer journey is, and are the pieces of the touch points that we have produced, are they making the impact that we want them to make, or is their journey just completely separate or different than we thought it was, and we've created all these materials that maybe we could get rid of some of them because they're just not necessary anymore, or create new ones that will help somebody move along kind of the buying trail. So,
next question.
Juan C. Robles in Mexico City, Mexico. What do you think will be the evolution of the graphic design in virtual reality?
Oh, wow. That's a lot of fun. It's funny. We had an intern do a project a long time ago called The Designer of the Future, and it was her idea was to have designers all geared out with these really technical, cool gloves that would just draw things on the walls and whatever. It was in space and stuff, and it was kind of a fun exercise to kind of go through it. But I do see designers in the future probably doing a lot of what they're doing now, except it's just going to be put into, like you said, a virtual environment, almost like a gaming environment. You can see that now with certain video games. There's definitely a designer's touch on certain things whether they have like a fake ad in the background or a real ad actually sponsored, like a product placement kind of thing, or some other kind of artwork that people can get excited about and kind of embedded in there as Easter eggs kind of thing. So there'll be room for designers in the future in virtual reality for sure.
Yeah, one of the things that we have to deal with now is, a lot of the stuff we do in VR is all stereo video. So we think about these logos and we think about our graphics, and we have to think about where they are in space. Like in how near they are and how far away, and do they blend into the background, or do you want them to pop out? And these are it's a new set of problems.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes from Simon Ray in Midlands in the UK. Regarding YouTube thumbnails, is it vital to show your brand name in the image, or is having recognizable formats and standards to your thumbnails more important?
I tend to think that the having some standards is probably more important. And the reason I say that is I think if you look at someone like Rick Beato, or there's a comedy podcast called Kill Tony. Not that these are the best designed thumbnails out there, but what they do is it's hyper clear within a millisecond of looking at these. You know exactly who they're from or what the show name is, at least. So, or at least the star of the show. So I think just seeing that repetition for years and not getting too just cluttering up the rest of the thumbnails is the way to go. And there's, like I said, it's like a telegraphic kind of response. You just know what it is right away.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania wonders, less is more. How do you think about white space in your design?
White space can be a great a technique to use, if you will. So, something that probably everybody's familiar with is the kind of gestalt properties of the FedEx logo. So you see the word FedEx, and there's that arrow reversed out in white space in there. So if you can get away with something like that, and if you're creative enough to be able to execute with those kinds of ideas, I think it's going to be a really powerful use of white space. That's just a very simple version of using it. When it comes to websites and things along those lines, white space has a different context and meaning. It's more about less of a very small static design and more about user flow and balance of pages and the whole user experience, more or less.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. What do you think of Apple's website design, specifically the long scrolling pages?
That's become the new thing, right? All these pages that go forever.
Right. Yeah. I don't have a problem with it. I actually, when it comes to designing, I actually really like like it for some reason. I don't know why. It just feels like you're telling one very long story, which I think can be a good thing. Again, it kind of comes back to every client's different, every brand's different, the way people sell are different. So I don't have a problem with it. I tend to like it. So, and I'm an Apple fanboy, I guess, too. So what are you going to do?
Exactly. Yeah. Next question.
Ryan Thompson in Houston, Texas. Speaking of VR, what about AR or MixedR with ad and logo placement in the world as we walk about?
Is that something you guys are thinking about?
Not really. We played around with some VR stuff a few years ago. We had a client that did retail build outs. So if you were building a Starbucks, they'd go and build it out. And so we played around with it a little bit there. It was just a little bit too early, I think, for us to do anything with it. And a lot of clients, I don't think, are really thinking about it unless they're doing something at a trade show that requires VR or they want to have some fun. But on a day-to-day tactical level right now, it's not something we're really into.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What trends from the past have worked their way back into modern design?
A lot of illustration styles definitely have in the last 4 or 5 years, or maybe a little bit longer. But I think there's you see it a lot in the arts community. There's a color palette and a line simplicity that you'll see in a lot of. I know it's very vague.
The desaturated tones and almost 30s. I feel like I see a lot of designs from that I would have. When I look at it immediately, at first, I would think this is from a poster from the 30s, but it's really something modern.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that, and some of it's been creeping into packaging a lot too. So I think just those are two obvious ones to me that come to mind quickly.
Patrick, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, really, really fascinating. It's great. We spend a lot of time just doing things and not talking about the creative end of things or talking about the design, and it's just so great to have you here. Where can people find out more about you?
The easiest place is just to either Google or go to C2, C as in Charlie, the number 2, creativestudio.com, and you can find me there.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks to the panelists for being here and being part of the conversation in the first hour and the second hour. Thanks to the viewers who asked all these questions, our producers who ask all the questions that drive this show. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end. It takes a small village every single day to put this show together. And people are all volunteering their time to design the tools, to operate the tools, to plan the tools and plan the conversation. And we just really appreciate everybody's contribution to that. Today, if we had done this in person, the Tlaloc Traversal is if we had walked around and asked these questions person to person, we would have traveled 105,000 miles. That is 169,000 kilometers, and that is 830 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. It's good to have you on, Patrick.
That was great. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Bill. It was nice meeting you guys.
Yeah.
Do you need anything else from me, or do we just hang up here, or what's the?
No, we're all done. We're all done.
Right. So I do appreciate it. Thank you guys.
We really appreciate you coming on. It was really great to hear it from the trenches. There's a lot of things you read, but really where you guys are at right now is just really fantastic.
Well, cool. Thank you. Well, looking forward to seeing us later, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. See you. Bye.